Let's move on to Sunday, and we head across the pond to Wembley Stadium in London, England. 9:30 a.m. Eastern is when this pops off. I think that's like, 3:30 p.m. for them in London. 72 Fahrenheit, mostly cloudy, 11 miles per hour. This is probably the best weather we've ever had in a UK game. Let's take a look at this. Falcons, Jaguars, and what a debacle by the Jacksonville Jaguars last week. I stayed off some spots that I liked. I stayed off of the Broncos and the Panthers, and I actually like those spots. And then I stayed off of the Texans, and that really drove me crazy. But let's talk about this one here, Atlanta, Jacksonville. We've seen this total open up at 44 at Pinnacle and drop to 43. We have a 1-point drop down to 43. From a side perspective here, we have Jacksonville opening up at, there were offshores that had it at 4.5, but Pinnacle, of course, waited until Sunday night at 8:05 p.m. and they let drop this at a 3 at minus 106. Right now it's -3 at minus 113. So there has been 7 cents of movement towards the Jacksonville Jaguars. And from a total perspective here, I should have both of these up, and that's my fault. I'll have it ready for the next one. But from a total perspective, let's move over here. Oh, I did that already. What am I talking about? So we have the 43 and the -3. My bad. Sorry, it's just so many numbers I've been staring at all day. So then cash-wise here for this one, we have 28% of the tickets and 53% of the cash on that under. 28 and 53 on the under. And on the spread, we have 52% of the tickets and 67% of cash on the Jaguars. So, Rainbow the God is waiting for Atlanta to hit to 3.5. Danny Lopez leaning Atlanta team total under. The problem with this spot is it doesn't quite fit our plan, and that's where we want to buy low, because you'd be buying both of these squads low. Falcons came in off an ugly 26 loss at Detroit. We talked about their running game completely shut down by the Lions. Are the Jaguars capable of doing the same? My answer is no. In their first game of the year, 24-10 win at home over the Panthers, these Falcons rushed for 154 yards on 32 carries, 4.8 yards per carry. Then in week 2, 25-24 victory over the Packers, they rushed 45 times for 211 yards, 4.7 yards per carry. Against the Lions, they rushed 20 times for 44 yards, 2.2 yards per carry. I'm not going to sit here and say that this running game is trash and Arthur Smith can't figure it out or anything like that. These sometimes you get stopped, and they just got stopped. Now, Desmond Ridder looked bad, and he's not being protected by the offensive line. He finished 21-38 for 201 yards, no touchdowns, no picks. He lost a fumble. Bijan Robinson had 10 carries for 33 yards and caught 4 passes for 27 yards. Kyle Pitts led receivers with 5 catches for 41 yards, and Drake London, for the second time in 3 games, did very little. Only caught 2 passes for 31 yards, but the offense as a whole was held to just 183 total yards. The Falcons averaged just 2.8 yards per play, while the Lions put up 5.6. The offensive line couldn't contain the Lions front 7 that had done nothing through 2 games. While the offense struggled, the Falcons defense tried to keep them in the game. They held the Lions to 4-14 on third down and 1-4 in the red zone. Cordero Patterson, thigh inactive again, despite being listed as questionable. When we thought, when's he going to make his debut? Does he do it here? And then Jeff Okudah returned from an injury to make his Atlanta debut against the team that drafted him in the Detroit Lions. The Jaguars coming off a listless, embarrassing 37-17 loss at home to the Texans. Part of Birdie's cap was that these teams who are about to head over to the UK just don't seem focused. And I know that we've talked about the Bills possibly being in that similar situation, except for the fact that a team that just put up 70 points is coming to Orchard Park. And I think that's going to make somebody pretty intense about the prep for this week. And I decided to still move on the Bills. But we'll get into that later. The Jags looked awful to start the game. Their first 5 drives ended in missed field goal, punt, blocked field goal, punt, and fumble. They were down 17-0 at the half. Trevor Lawrence, 27-40 for 279 yards, a touchdown and a pick. Etienne, 19 carries for 88 yards, caught 4 for 50. Evan Ingram led receivers with 7 catches for 67 yards. Christian Kirk was next with 4 for 54 and a touchdown. Calvin Ridley only caught 3 passes, and he dropped 3 passes, 2 in the red zone. And he was flagged twice for false starts. He played really badly He played really badly, where it's kind of thing where you just want to pull him off the field and slap him in the face. The defense looked awful. Back to this offense. The Jaguars had 404 yards of offense and only saw the red zone twice. There's a few teams that fit that mold. 404 yards of offense, you only get the red zone twice. They could get no pressure on C.J. Stroud. 0 sacks, 4 quarterback hits. They allowed the Texans to go 9 of 15 on third down. Rookie right tackle Anton Harrison injured his right ankle. X-rays were negative. Coach Peterson says he's good to go, but this is what it's come down to. You have a offensive line that's not protecting Trevor Lawrence. You have a rookie getting hurt, and they need him to play because Cole Van Lanen will get the start at right tackle if Harrison isn't available to go. I don't know how to trust either team here. I don't know how to make a move on either team, and maybe you can illuminate the spot better than I just did. Take it away, Troy. The Wembley Stadium UK game number 1, Falcons Jaguars.
I'm a lot like you, where I keep landing in the middle. I mean, all this action on the Jags, I've been shorting the Jags all season. I want to continue to short the Jags, but Falcons are also a team I'm trying to short. I'm not trying to buy the Falcons. I think they've been a fraudulent team through the first few weeks, and you got two teams coming off extreme lows and desperate spots. Jaguars more desperate than the Falcons, to be honest. But yeah, you look at some of these Jags advanced metrics, and you could just tell that it's either poor offensive design or it's a lack of trust completely with the offensive line. Trevor Lawrence is actually, per PFF, is rated as the 3rd best quarterback in the NFL, to my surprise. He's hit last week, in week 3, he had the lowest pocket time, which is 1.3 seconds. So we held on to the ball 1.3 seconds on average in the pocket last week. Dude, that's just enough time to catch the ball, find the laces, and throw it. Like, that's not holding on to the ball at all. And that's a sign of a great quarterback if he knows that if he holds on to it any longer, it's about to be a devastating situation. So, I mean, you got to give it to him. He's trying to do what he can with this offensive line, and I just have to imagine it's I don't want to say it because Doug Peterson is a guy I want to believe in, but I tend to think there's some poor offensive design behind it. So yeah, like you said, no sacks on Stroud. If you can't pressure the QB, your defense sucks. It's that simple. And the Falcons, they can't pass block. They let the Lions sack Ritter 7 times, and the Lions only sacked Geno Smith 1 time. Desmond Ritter's pressured on 26% of his dropbacks. This is the worst quarterback in the league, in my opinion, from what I've seen so far. And per PFF, he's rated 1 player, 28th in the league, below Justin Fields. And that just kind of stood out to me because I know how bad Justin Fields has been. On the defensive side, the run D is rated 4th. And surprisingly enough, when I watched that team, I watched those defensive backs play for Atlanta. Dude, they're so good in the offense, fitting the run. They play some cover 4 where the safeties just are looking to fit the run. And they do a good job. But their pass rush is trash. Their coverage is trash, even though they could stop the run. So, a lot of these defensive grades for this team fell off a cliff last week when they played a competent offense. I mean, Jesus. I mean, give me the points if I had to take a side. But one thing I'm going to take in this game is Calvin Ridley. He's got a revenge game versus his old team, Atlanta, who sold his ass. Didn't want him. I'll take his yards, his touchdowns, all that. I know he's coming off a bad game as well. I think this is a great time to take some Calvin Ridley. So that's what I'm going to be betting on in this game.
Calvin Ridley props. I do my very best to stay away from player props, but if I ever back them, it's fading somebody off a spectacular night or backing someone off of a poor one. But my ROI is much, much better fading a player after a spectacular game rather than trying to catch a falling knife. Now, this is different catching the falling knife because you have the Rabenga with the Falcons. So I can see that look. Spenny Penny Bomb says Ridley going to eat that secondary apart. A lot of people looking at, if they can get the Falcons at 3.5, waiting for the 3.5. And Terry Walker says over. I don't trust these offenses to move the ball at a rate that would casually, comfortably hit the over. But the Jaguars just allowed 37 points to the Texans. So even though I can't comfortably or comfortably bet the under. I don't want the over. So I do not force myself into having action on Thursday nights or England games. I don't need them. I try to tell myself that, and I say it out loud just so I don't reach.
Tell you
So
what, though, Jim, when I do see you bet a prop, I don't think I've ever seen you miss a prop. I mean, you probably bet 3 in the past year or so, but I don't know if I've ever seen you miss a prop. And the ones you lean towards always cash.
well,
Oh, you missed an under. You bet LeBron maybe under one time, and
I did bet LeBron under one time, and he got there. He got there late in the last year. But
if there's 2 people in this game that I want to align with when I'm betting a prop, it's Spenny Penny and it's Mike M. And seeing Spenny in the chat, giving some love to Ridley, I mean, that's a beautiful thing.
I like it. I see where you're at. I can understand people wanting the Falcons at plus 3.5, but it's a double-edged sword. If it gets to 3.5, isn't that going to make you a little nervous? That it moved there. So
True.
I get it. I get it. Birdie says, have to think you all are not the only folks pitting the Ridley revenge angle to work. Would think the books would have adjusted. Under on Ridley seems more plus EV, given I suspect the books have adjusted. That's fair. Darren Turner says, kind of lean the Jags in London. Look, they've been there a lot. They're comfortable there. And I don't want to invest in any, you hear Troy talking about shorting both these teams. I don't see how you could confidently back one of them. Let's move on.